Carl Toro here from Fightful.com. I'm joined on the line by Mayweather Promotions CEO Leonard Ellerbe, who is kind enough to take time away from a busy schedule to talk to us about this Saturday's Barclays Center card on Showtime and a couple of fighters that will be featured on that card. Before we get into it, Leonard, how are you doing? Just days away from the fights.
Great. We have a big card this Saturday night, live Showtime, featuring none other than our main event, Deontay Wilder taking on Dominic Figueroa, which I think will be a terrific fight. It will be lots of action, and I think the fight will end in a knockout.
All right, wow. Swing out for the fences, a knockout. I do agree that it's going to also end in a knockout. Now, let's talk about a couple of fighters that are going to be on that card as well. For Mayweather Promotions getting a couple of their big-name prospects, Juan Heraldez, Richardson, Hitchins. Let's start with Heraldez, who's facing former world champion Argenis Mendez on the Showtime TV opener, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a big test and a big step up for Heraldez. You feel confident that this is now the time to pull the trigger on Heraldez and give him the bigger fights as we are approaching this Saturday and for the future for Heraldez?
Oh, most definitely. The timing is right. He's ready to go. He's right where he needs to be. He's been coming along and progressing very, very well. And he wants to be tested. You know, I feel very comfortable with putting him in this fight, and I think he's going to pass with flying colors. I fully expect him to knock Argenis Mendez out come this Saturday night.
Yeah, Heraldez has done very well to get to this point in his career. 16-0. He hasn't fought a guy like Argenis Mendez, where he is, a guy who's a former world champion. He's not a guy who's just way past his prime or anything like that. He's fighting guys like Peterson and Ivan Redkach, and is doing really well against those names. My question is, if Heraldez wins and looks good doing so, obviously a big TV crowd is going to watch him because this is a Deontay Wilder fight on Showtime. Does the focus on him kind of now start to turn towards him becoming a real legitimate contender and work for a title shot, sort of finding a time place for him to potentially get that opportunity?
Well, I'm gonna be very honest with you. He's on the fast track. I feel very comfortable if the opportunity came with us to put him in with Jose Ramirez tomorrow. If the opportunity came to put us in with what's the other kid? Maurice Hooker. Yeah. We have no problem with putting him in. And he's been asking me he wants to fight Porter. And I consider him the best out of the bunch. But it's just a mentality. He's ready to go. He's ready to go. Juan can fight.
One thing that I've noticed, and with guys like Heraldez, and I see it in a lot of guys like Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez, who are young, early into their careers, kind of start have the mentality to say, I want the big fights. I feel confident in my abilities to win those big fights, and it turns out that they do, and they perform very well on the big stage against world-class opponents with flying colors. When you're in your position and you're looking at these types of guys, in the example with Heraldez facing Argenis Mendez, is it tough trying to figure out when is the right time in doing so, and how do you gauge whether or not these fighters are ready for the big stage at this moment? Not potentially, but right now.
It's just a matter of just the timing part of, I see the guys that he works with. He works out with and trains with world-class competitors, fighters training our gym. I've watched him work with world champions. I know what he's capable of bringing, and I have no problem putting him in there with any 40-pounder. And we're not, when you hear about Mayweather Promotion, we're not going to babysit our fighters. We want to see where they're at, and they feel they want to continue to challenge themselves, and we're all up for that. Floyd being a great fighter himself, he's had that mentality. We know what we got with our fight. So that's why we don't mind putting them in. We don't mind putting them in.
Now, kind of moving on to Richardson Hitchins, who's no stranger to the Barclays Center, and and I've seen him fight multiple times. I see the potential in Richardson Hitchins. He's still developing. He's young. How do you rate Hitchins' progress so far in the pro ranks?
Well, he's coming along. He's coming along well. He's another one that he's had several camps working with several world champions, and then we talking about young guns and the Devin Haney's of the world. And I mean, he's trained and worked out with a number of guys. He's progressing very, very, very fast. And again, he's another guy that he wants all the smoke at 140. You know, and I'm expecting a big outcome this Saturday night from him. He wants to go in there and show his fans at Barclays what kind of fighter he's about. And again, we're going to continue to move him right along too.
You know what?
We have a number of young prospects that we are very excited about, and that's what it's about.
I've seen a lot of guys fight at the Barclays Center, and they eventually become, legit contenders and guys that people can see as potential world champions. And I've spoken to fighters in the past. I asked Sean Porter about fighting at the Barclays Center. He's told me the energy is different from virtually any other place in the United States. What is it about, putting these guys at the Barclays Center that kind of makes them, better prepared for the big stage? And Richardson Hitchins has done really well. He's fought at Barclays Center multiple times, and he's looking good so far. So what is it about the venue itself that kind of gives fighters a better preparation for the future?
Because it is a big stage. It is a big stage, and you're talking about anytime you go in a big arena like that, and most oftentimes you're talking about guys are fighting in front of. Well, they are actually not fighting in front of that many people, but you talking about a venue that's 12, 14,000 people. On any of those given, it's always a big fight, a big arena. So, and guys are used to fighting on the big. When I say big stage, meaning coming out of the amateur program. That's one thing I can say is the competition level. It prepares these guys for the next steps. And with that being said, is that anytime you go into an arena like a Barclays arena, you're comfortable in this. In Hitchins' case, he's from that area, so he knows that he's put in the work. So all he's going in there to do is execute. No matter who we put in front of him, he's got a job to do, and he goes in there and executes.
From what I can understand, Richardson Hitchins' next fight against Alejandro Munera is going to be an 8-round fight. I believe it's only a second scheduled 8-round fight. Is that going to be now the goal for Richardson Hitchins this year, is to give him longer scheduled fights and prepare him for maybe a 10-rounder fight end of this year, next year, as you sort of start building him up for new fans to watch and further develop his career?
Yeah, actually, I think this probably will be, depending upon the outcome of the fight, this probably will be his last 8-round fight. He's ready to go to 10 rounds.
So right now, looking at Heraldez and Richardson Hitchins, would you expect both of them to come out on top with knockout victories that will sort of elevate their status even more?
Most definitely. Both are two terrific fighters, and in Juan Heraldez's case, again, I would have zero problem putting him in with Ramirez, Hooker, right away. I think he can beat both of those guys tomorrow. That's how confident I am in his skill set and his mentality and his work ethic. He's ready to go.
Well, one fighter that he's not fighting on this card, but he fought very recently that you have on Mayweather Promotions is Rolando Romero, and I've spoken to him very recently, and he was very confident. He's another guy who looks fantastic out in the ring, and he said he wants the big fights. He told me he already had like the next 18 months of his career all mapped out. Is that another guy you have big hopes on to eventually get him into that title contendership status within the next year or two?
Oh, most definitely. He's another exciting young prospect. And what Rolly brings, he's a tremendous puncher, and he's getting better and better each fight with working on his boxing skills, but I tell you, when I watch this guy work, I'm always sitting on the edge of my seat because you know what the outcome is going to be, and it's going to be in dramatic fashion. He's a guy that really brings excitement to the fight, and sign up for KOs if you want to fight Rolly. He's willing to take on anybody. He's willing to box anybody, and I love that mentality about him. And the scary part is that he's getting better and better each and every time out.
When you watch these guys kind of develop, when you see a Richardson Hitchins or a Raleigh or a Heraldez kind of work in the gym, and you see it before your eyes, their development and their growth, does you get excited about their future prospects and kind of start already maybe in the back of your mind sort of planning out what you can do for them and what's their, in terms of world title contendership and getting those world title fights? Does it get easy to sort of get swept up in their abilities and the way to perform at the gym and inside the ring?
Almost definitely. Again, because what we do is that we have a great sense of how to develop our young guys. That's why we do the dark shows. It's not always about fighting on television. We do dark shows just about every month, and we've been doing them locally at Sam's Town here in Las Vegas, and that's giving the guys a tremendous opportunity to not only to stay busy, but to continually progress as young prospects in this sport and to work on their skill set as they move along and develop a fan base and a following. And that's what we've been really focused on. And it's not very many promoters out there who are doing dark shows, but it's the best way to develop these young fighters is keeping them active, keeping them in an environment where it's a fan-friendly environment. They're used to fighting, and fighting regularly. And the one thing about the commission here, there's no such thing as matching guys with softly. Every one of our guys, because that's one thing I commend Bob Bennett, the commissioner here in Las Vegas, is that they're tough, and we're totally okay with that because, again, we don't want to find out way down the road what we're working with. We want to be able to test our guys early and often.
One thing, but before I let you go, one thing that I do wanted to ask was kind of basically the latest of what you can tell me on Gervonta Davis. I know you guys are planning a homecoming fight for him. It hasn't been formally announced, and I know the WBA has recently ordered him to fight against Ricardo Nunez. So just wanted to know what's the latest on Gervonta Davis's next fight.
Yeah, he's going to be fighting July 27th, and he's going to be fighting on Showtime, and you just said it. He's the WBA champ, and we have a mandatory, just like any other fighter does. And we have to do what we have to do. It's not ideally a situation where that you want to, but this is all part of the process of developing the fighters. In this particular case, we want to be able to bring Gervonta, take him back home. He has a tremendous following globally. And the fans back in Baltimore, they've been anxious, and the D.C. and the Virginia area, they've been anxious to see him come back home in a homecoming type fight. And this is a terrific opportunity for him. And we want to continue to keep him busy and fighting in the biggest fights that are possible. And, hopefully, if he can get through his mandatory, we're going to bring him back in the fall, and he's going to fight in the big fight in the fall. And hopefully it'll be a unification fight. If not, then everyone's calling him out, and we're going to make the biggest fight possible for Gervonta Davis. He has a very, very big career ahead of him, and we are so excited about what the future lies ahead.
So any specifics on the venue per se, or that's still sort of being worked out?
It'll be Royal Farms Arena.
All right, Leonard, but one last thing. I can't let you go without... I know you said at the start of the call that you predict the Deontay Wilder versus Dominic Breazeale fight to end in a knockout, but which of the two do you have winning at the end of it all?
Oh, Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder. He's Deontay Wilder in my eyes. He's the best heavyweight in the world, and he'll get an opportunity once again to show the world why he's the best heavyweight in the world. I think that he knocks any of the guys out there in the heavyweight division. He's just that good.
All right, Leonard, thanks so much for talking to me. Best of luck to all your fighters this Saturdays and to the rest of your Mayweather promotion staff. Looking forward to seeing the fights, and I wish you the best of luck. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.